All right, so good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for joining the Femme Noire Collective Incorporated in this evening. We're having a panel discussion for mental health and the Black community. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll have a brief moment at the end to have Q&A, so we'll do a brief Q&A at the end. So before we start, I want to talk a little bit about what and who La Femme Noire Collective is. La Femme Noire Collective Incorporated is a multi-ethnic nonprofit organization currently serving South Florida. Our purpose is to maximize awareness and promote emotional and mental health in women of color. We aim to accomplish this by providing webinars and events focusing on topics such as therapy, self-awareness, coping skills, and self-care. Best of all, we provide all of this while creating a social outlet for our members. If you would like to know more about our organization or are interested in becoming a member, please visit our website at www.lafemmenoirecollective.com. So now I'm going to introduce my distinguished and beautiful panel. First, we have Ms. Nikiis Taylor. She is an intellect and full of passion, drive, and tenacity. Because of her passion, her personal experiences and professional endeavors, she is dedicated to pulling others up as she rises. She is a registered mental health clinician with the state of Florida, holding a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling and marriage and family therapy. Throughout her career, she has developed a passion for helping individuals, adults, and children that are experiencing challenges surrounding their mental and emotional health. Currently, she works for the Palm Beach County School District as a behavioral health professional, where she is able to provide sound counsel and psychoeducation to her students and their families. Nikiis is also the CEO of Pulling Others Up As I Rise Counseling Services, where she provides counseling to the community. Thank you for joining us, Nikiis. Next, we have Ezsa Allen. For 13 years, Ms. Allen has been committed to healing her clients, both children and adults, specializing in trauma, substance abuse, depression, and anxiety. She focuses on the underserved, minority, and culturally diverse communities, creating means of access to alleviate barriers hindering one from receiving the help they deserve. Ms. Allen is able to organically connect with her clients because she too comes from an underserved upbringing. She was raised by a single mother of 6 who left her native home, Nicaragua, to build a better life for her family in the cities of Riviera Beach and Lake Park. Overcoming many obstacles while attending John F. Kennedy Middle School and Palm Beach Gardens High School, as well as working in various fields throughout her career. She found a passion for helping families acquire the skill sets for living healthier. Raising her own family, 1 niece and 3 children, Ms. Allen understands the hardships that come along with not having access, and she is attacking the core of the issues in the community. She believes that healing is a collaborative endeavor and takes time, knowledge, and great effort to overcome. Since completing her Master's of Science in Counseling of Psychology in 2016 at Palm Beach Atlantic University, Ms. Allen founded Social Age Counseling LLC, a counseling service for all ages. Her nonprofit, Mind Over You, also provides counseling, therapeutic coping skills, and healthy ways to heal for those who don't have access. In addition to those services, she uses social media to educate and advocate mental health awareness on a daily basis. You can follow her at officially Ezsa on all social media platforms. Ms. Allen's ultimate goal is to eliminate the stigma and negative connotations that are attached to mental health and help others become comfortable with the process of healing. Thank you so much for joining us, Ezsa.
Thank you for having me.
And last but not least, we have Dr. Angela Shuttlesworth. Dr. Shuttlesworth is a proud graduate of Alabama State University, Berry University, and Clark Atlanta University. Her dissertation research was an exploratory study of the perceived well-being of African American families in time of crisis and its relationship to their use of resources in the metropolitan Atlanta, Georgia area. Has developed the healthy method to tackle the complexities of team engagement, passion-driven productivity, and effective communication. She founded B League Grow to equip executive leadership teams with the tools to prevent and heal toxic work environments. By working with companies such as Boeing and Johnson & Johnson, she has facilitated hard yet necessary discussions regarding allyship in the workplace and the 7 keys to effectively managing the time of a storm. She has facilitated leadership retreats and completed keynote speaking engagements for federal collaboratives with healthy and human services, nonprofit organizations such as Legal Aid, YWCA, and Dress for Success, and local government organizations such as the cities of Boynton Beach and Lauderdale Lakes, Broward, and Palm Beach counties in Florida, and DeKalb County, Georgia as well. She has also developed small business incubators for local governments to ensure their businesses are able to thrive in turbulent times. Whether empowering these leaders to rediscover and realign their personal mission and vision to their organizations, or deal with effectively leading in the time of a storm through emotional intelligence, or understanding and combating compassion fatigue, Dr. AMS uses her creativity and fun to help them reconnect with each other and the necessary work at hand. She is also certified Wiley DISC partner and facilitates leadership and team building activities using data-informed truths to help organizations build true and sustainable equity. Thank you for joining us this evening, Dr. Shuttlesworth. Okay, so we are just going to open this up with discussion questions. First, I just want to talk about currently research is showing that we are actually in the Black community, we have the lowest rates of mental illness by ethnic group, but the numbers are steadily on the rise. So what's actually going on and what kind of trends are we actually seeing when we're talking about mental health in the Black community?
Well, firstly, I think that our numbers are low because a lot of the people in our community are not seeking mental health services due to stigma. So, as you all know, I work for the school district, and my population is mainly children, and I work for a K through 8. And when I have children of Caribbean ethnicity, for example, they they do have a stigma of mental health, and because their family deems it as um, something is wrong with their child, or they're crazy, or anything of that regard. And so I think that that's one of the main reasons why our numbers are low, not just within the Caribbean community, but African Americans as a whole. I think we've also been conditioned to continue moving on with life despite our own mental health challenges and or lack of self-care. I don't think that we necessarily have the luxury to take care of ourselves as other ethnicities do.
I see a lot of head noddings on that one. We really don't oftentimes have that luxury to just stop what we're doing and take time to take care of ourselves. Anyone else want to jump in on this question?
For the sake of time, we can almost just say ditto. Like it's very, and the conversation that we had just in discussion as we were getting ready for this time together, when you start talking about not having access to resources, with that long behind intro or bio, one of the pieces of it was talking about like the coping mechanisms, right? And a lot of times, Dr. Sean Utsi created this thing called the Africultural Coping Skills Inventory. And it was a way for to highlight the way that Black people cope. But one of the things that happened as people would actually go through the inventory, they would be reminded of the ways that we cope. They would, and a lot of times we forget. We're just so much in the hustle and bustle of putting one foot in front of the other, trying to figure it out, leveraging our girlfriends and what we were talking about earlier, and or relying on people who really don't have the expertise. Like the true expertise, but they like, well, I went through something similar. I know a cousin and somebody who did something. And so we go off of that. And that also is somewhat a little bit of our survival mode. And reality is that we don't trust the healthcare system. And the more and more we dismiss that truth, we miss the opportunity to truly meet people where they are. So one of the things is highlighting, like, yes, we cope. Yes, we use these certain rituals and we rely on our spiritual faith to get us through and to where we're going and get us from where we've been. And there is nothing, I talk about my therapist so much. Let me tell y'all, I try to normalize it as much as possible. And I'm grateful that people actually do feel confident enough. I get a lot of inboxes at least once a week where somebody's like, hey, I need a therapist. And I'm like, hallelujah, we got one more. And we have to celebrate that and normalize the openness. Like, I don't need to know your business. I don't ask no questions. And that's the thing. A lot of times people think that when somebody's coming because they're in a situation that you got the right to have access to all of their story. I don't even know about all that. Talk to your therapist. Here you go. And here you go. Here go some codes. And then we talk about, like, even myself as a small business owner, my therapist don't take insurance. Even if I did have the regular traditional insurance, I'm $225 every time I talk to her. Okay. So we have to be honest about the reality of every time we're telling people, go to therapy, go to therapy. It has to be a conversation about access to therapy, financial support, and resources that can pay these therapists in an equitable way, especially when they're good. So there's a lot of impacts around why the numbers are low, but I think that they are drastically low because they're underreported and we're just trying to do our best to figure it out.
And one thing that I would like to incorporate into everything that everyone just said too is the relatability too of when they do get a therapist. Sometimes they don't feel relatable with their therapist, so then they back off and then they be like, "Oh, that's not for me," or whatever it may be. But it's not that it's not for you. You just haven't found a connection with your therapist, so to speak. So, in addition to everything everyone else is saying, it's also the relatability as well.
Thank you, ladies. Yeah, that's good information because I know even in my position in the school district as the school psychologist for the CAPE team, we're often trying to connect children with mental health services outside of the district. And we also often hear from some of the parents that, you know, they were in therapy, it did not work out. Thank you for that. They're in therapy and it did not work out, so they feel like they need to stop. But it's like, no, there are plenty of different agencies out there. We just have to find an agency that has what exactly it is that you're looking for. With that, I did forget, so I did not introduce myself. I'm sorry. My name is Tracey Seabrook. I am the president of the Femme Noire Collective, and I'm also a school psychologist. So I work for the school district of Palm Beach County. So I do work in mental health, but I typically tend to work in our kids who are in our pre-K through 12 system. So my wheelhouse is that younger age, so I don't necessarily have that specialty with working with the adult population. So it's always good to be in community with other mental health professionals, especially those who are Black women. So I absolutely enjoy it. All right. So our next question I have is, so what types of things do we see that are actually leading to the increase of mental illness? So are things actually getting worse, or are we just getting better at identifying and treating mental illness in communities of color? Because I know a lot of times when we're working and talking about like trauma, and they're talking about how with ACEs, they've extended the ACEs study to include community violence and all of these different types of things, because the original study was done on a group of white males, right? And that's how they got that original information. So they've started expanding it. So are things actually getting worse, or are we just better at capturing it?
I think personally things are increasing. I think that the levels of anxiety, depression, even self-harm and suicide in our community, believe it or not, is increasing. I think that's something that with that stigma that we were talking about earlier, we don't identify a lot of our children as having those issues because the parents aren't educated enough. So then they just kind of, and not only cultural, but like as minorities in whole, we don't believe in mental health. We don't believe in seeing a therapist. We tell our children, we try to deal with our issues in-house. You don't talk about your business. You don't tell. And another thing too is we get embarrassed. And our children are a reflection of us. So now if we go out and try to get help, then that's going to seem like we did something wrong. So that embarrassment, or they feel like they're just doing something, or they fail as a parent. And it's not that, we all have to learn how to deal with stress. We all have to learn how to deal with different things that we need, that life will throw at us. Life is an up and down. I call it the heart rate monitor. It's never going to be always positive. It's never going to be always negative, So you need to learn how to cope with these things. But if we aren't educated on it, we're going to continue a cycle until we do fall into a depression, or we do fall into that anxiety, or we do fall into the self-harm, to where now you're needing that help, that medical help. So now a lot of kids are getting Baker Act at school at an increased rate. So now these things are being brought to the parents' attention, and they either didn't know that was going on, or they turned a blind. And I don't think that parents do it intentionally, but sometimes, each case is individualized. So I do think that the cases are increasing, and it depends. Like the kids, I work in the community. I work in the school district too. So I reach the kids, but then they go back home into the parents in a household where the issues are still replicating itself. So it's like the kids get the help, but then they go back into the home. So it's still like a tug of war,
Absolutely. Go ahead, Nikiis.
To piggyback off of what Ms. Allen was saying, it's almost like you make some progress with the children and you're helping them heal, but then they go back into a triggering environment. What I find is that I don't have a lot of parental support. And when we communicate to parents that, your child is a lot of them do turn a blind eye. And it's disheartening because we at school, we are extremely heartfelt in trying to figure out, okay, what mental health referrals or agencies can we refer this student to? I provide parents with a plethora of resources, and they don't always utilize them. And I agree, the amount of children that are having suicidal ideations and that are actually inflicting self-harm is on the rise. I just did a suicide risk assessment this week, and I did 2 or 3 of them last week. So it happens a lot, and because I'm seeing it along campus, I, connected with my other mental health professionals. So we have a co-located therapist, a school counselor, our school psychologist, along with our administration, and we put together a mental health presentation specifically for our middle schoolers because that's where we're seeing the rise. And after we did that, we had 5 or 6 more students report that they are inflicting non-suicidal self-harm. So part of that was amazing because yes, you are reporting, you are asking for help, but on the other side, it's sad because a lot of them are dealing with anxiety, a lot of them are dealing with depression, a lot of them, their behaviors are manipulated or expressed as attention seeking, but what they're looking for is some type of emotional support from their mom or their dad. So it's a lot. I mean, I appreciate the work that I do. I wholeheartedly enjoy what I do, but it is saddening to not have the parental support as much as we should.
Amen. I'm in agreement. And as I was looking down, I was getting my phone. So I'm like, one, let me put myself on the timer to answer this question. But And then also I went back to a little bit of what both of you all were saying. Are y'all familiar with the Baraka Boys? And so I put the link in the chat. There was this group that from Baltimore where they took these, I mean, like the gentlemen who were having the most hardcore, like their behavior and their actions and their discipline, all of the, they had the rap sheet, right? And they were like, what happens if we change the environment? And so they were part of the study for like multiple years. So they told the boys. So it gave them time to kind of, I'm gonna be hard. And then it's a safe space for me to release. I can breathe. Okay. And then of course you bring them back into their home environment. And what happens? They go through, and some of them still kind of like, this doesn't work for me. And then, but of course, majority of them had a major decline. The other part of that was that they started the program telling them, okay, y'all are going to be in this part of this. So I'm here in this environment temporarily, but I know I get to go back to Africa. I get to go back to this safe space. Unfortunately, I hate to say it was with, I think if not all, people who didn't look like them. And so that in itself is messaging. But then what the other part of it was, which ties into as well as a lot of our support, is like one-time transactional, and we don't honor the words that we say for our youth. So what did they do? Canceled it because they didn't have the funding. And so you get these kids to believe in you and to being a part of this new reality that they too hope for. And that's the thing I think that we forget a lot of times, is that our youth are very vocal about how they feel right now. And they are also inundated with a lot of pressure, a lot of times, and this is why I'm very intentional about speaking to the unique experience of our youth. I feel like a lot of times they are just ostracized. They are just negatively exposed, like, you know how the millennials are. And I'm like, y'all do know we 40 something. These are not millennials. They're a different generation. Like, let's start there. And there's always these wars between the generations, but particularly for our youth, it is just, one, we still figuring it out. And then let's talk about, not even talk about the state of, all of us are in a traumatic situation post this pandemic, but we have this mask of everything's okay and we're back to normal. Masks are off, we're outside. And we're doing that same thing emotionally and as it relates to mental health with our youth, expecting them to be able to not see the magnitude of navigating all of these pressures that are constantly coming at them and their parents and their communities, as if those things that were systematically oppressing them still don't exist. And they do. So I'll stop there.
Wow, thank you. Yeah, that was a lot to digest from all three of you. There's so much going on. So that's good to know, because I know I have had friends who ask that question. You know, more people are starting to hear about their friends or someone they know. So that degree to which you know someone who has died by suicide, right, is getting a lot smaller than it used to be. It used to be, you know, you heard of it on TV, and now it's more so your friend's son or, you know, your neighbor's nephew. So it's getting a lot closer to home. And someone on my Facebook page did say, they posed the question, is it tougher out there, or are these kids just soft? And I was like, first of all, when we're talking about mental health, the fact that you use the term soft kind of hit me somewhere where it was like that nerve and everything stood up on the back of my neck. But I was just like, this is how we're raising our children to want to break the generational curses and learn how to deal with problems differently. But then when they do, we also, on the other hand, go, oh my gosh, you all are so soft. Like, we would have just handled this on our own, or we would have just fought it out. And so what messaging are we sending to their kids? Like, they don't even understand or really know what it is they're supposed to do in any given situation. And that pressure in itself can cause a lot of stress and anxiety, even with just trying to navigate and function on a day-to-day basis, right? So,
ooh, can I add something in right there when you said that? Yeah, listen, because I was like, look, I didn't forget what the original question was. I was up there talking about the youth and the Baraka boys and everything, because y'all took me down a whole nother path. You know, we start talking about our babies. I don't play about our youth. And, you know, but particularly like the thing with Twitch, it was so, and she started with Robin Williams, like all of these times when we're having these conversations, which is why I specifically sent the message to Lisa Stewart, who's on here, and she's in Los Angeles, but this conversation around suicide, and she has a movement that she's doing around that is particularly aimed towards our youth. And if they judge Twitch, what you think this child gonna think y'all gonna do to him? And it's like they judge Robin. I mean, like, it doesn't even matter the magnitude of the success of the person. It's like, what, you had this, why are you doing that? And we don't understand that negative energy and that judgment, and particularly for our LGBTQIA plus community and the things that they're navigating. And it feels like, oh, well, that's just a choice, or they just putting that in these people's faces. It's just it's society doing it. No, it's finally people having the space to be themselves. And we're having to reconcile, like, yes, there could be, that's another conversation, but we're having to reconcile with the reality of everybody having access to the mic. Like, we used to say more people need to be able to talk and speak, and now people are speaking, and we don't like that they're not speaking the agenda that is comfortable or palatable, right? And the reality is we're hurting, and it's like, oh shoot, well, what are we gonna do with that? So it is definitely a lot, and I definitely think it has increased.
All right. I'm loving this conversation. I feel like I should have been doing this one conversation every month, because we're getting a lot of really good stuff going on here.
Yes.
I wanted to expound a little bit on the soft comment, because I hear that a lot as well. But when I'm speaking to other adults or colleagues that use that word, when they break it down to me, what they're really communicating is that they feel like the youth today does not have any survival skills.
Correct.
And
yes,
I agree.
Now there we go.
And I think that there should be a balance, because when I look at my childhood, by the time I was 11, 12 years old, I could cook a full meal. I knew how to clean a house. I knew a little bit about bills. Now, when I look at that today as a clinical professional, I'm like, dang, I used to really know all of that at 12, but I'm almost 30 and I could run a house by myself. I know what it looks like to pay bills. I don't have to, ask my mom, can she do X, Y, and Z? I do know how to cook. And when I'm talking to some of my kiddos now, they don't have certain life skills. And I do think that it's important for them to have a balance. Like, you don't need all the responsibilities all of the time, but you do need to know how to take care of yourself. Hygiene is not taught to them like it should be. So in that aspect, I do agree.
I would like to throw in there too, the unbalance. I don't know if that's the right term. It is a different era from back then to today's society, right? And I put myself as we in the older category.
We with you, sis.
We had to struggle differently. So you have to put that in mind as to that survival skill that Dr. Angela talked about earlier kicks in for you, versus the kids today who everything is given to.
Yes.
So thinking about entitled, or you're having to expect everything given to you and not having to work for anything. Whereas my mom, I was raised with a single mom, 6 kids. And I, like Nikiis said, I had to cook. I'm the middle child, and I had to fend for myself at like 12 while my mom is working 3 jobs. I have to cook for myself, or I don't eat. She provided food, but she's working. So I think there's a difference in the era one. 2, there is an unbalance in emotional regulation between the 2 eras. 1 didn't have any. We weren't taught emotional regulation. We were taught that you suck it up, you deal with your issues. I don't care about your feelings. I'm mom, you do what I say. Right? Versus today's society, where I have to hear everything you say. And now kind of go along with what you are saying and what you want, but then you're lacking the guidance in a child. Because children need to be guided, right? They shouldn't be able to make 100% of decisions for themselves. You're not even equipped mentally because your brain doesn't stop developing until, I'm sorry, I didn't have my phone off. Your brain doesn't stop developing until you're 25. So, there's age appropriate things for every age step. So a child at 12 shouldn't make certain decisions because they're not developed mentally to do those things. Whereas, a 25-year-old will make a totally decision, look back and be like, what was I thinking back then? So there's a lot of different things to kind of include in with that.
Can I ask a what you call them question? So I'm a call and response person. So I love some amens and some yeses and all of that. So are y'all okay if we just stay, if we want to just stay off me? Because it was a couple of times I'm like, yes, sis, yes. And I needed you to hear that. But then I'm also like, okay, wait, are we walking on eggshells? What are we doing in this? So, okay.
It's fine. I have a dog, and so when I start talking, she gets whiny. So that's why
okay.
I put myself on mute, but I am fine with it. I'm here for all.
She was just preaching with that, the differences of that are, oh goodness. Because it's like is it entitlement or is it, this is what children were supposed to have the freedom to be able to do and to just be kids. And I think we're discovering what does just be kids mean for our culture and our traditions, because we've never had that luxury. That's a luxury to us. And so we're, like you said, we're so far from certain things that it is like a tug of war, it feels like sometimes. So Thank you for that. That was good.
I know, that's amazing. I love the discussions. So the next question I have, okay, so we're hearing a lot more about people going to therapy. So on one hand, there are a lot of Black people who are not seeking out mental health supports. But then depending on where your circle is, I know when I go on my social media page, my friends have no problem telling you they have a therapist, they're going to therapy. Everybody needs to have a therapist. And so like I personally see the reduction of stigma around going to therapy and getting help, even though we still know that there's a lot of work to do. But then we're also hearing a lot more about life coaching. And so I think when people are trying to get help and support, now there's so many different types of ways we can get mental health support that people don't even know what this stuff actually is. Because even when we talk about self-care, people are like, I went to Starbucks today, hashtag self-care, right? And I'm like, if it wasn't intentionally done to bring you joy, or it's not something you're doing intentional, you just had Starbucks. Like ma'am,
you just had coffee. What are you talking about?
That was just coffee. Like everything isn't hashtag self-care. So people really don't know what this stuff is. So I do want to give you all the floor to talk a little bit about therapy versus life coach. Like, what is the difference? And then how do we know what we should use at any given time? Or how do I know if I need a life coach or if I need a therapist? Or maybe both.
I'm very judgmental, so I was being quiet.
And I was just about to lead with, I don't want to judge anybody's career or profession. I will say this, and again, I don't want to judge anybody's career or profession, but I think that life coaching can be a good tool for someone who wants to need help in motivation and empowering their own self-esteem, like the motivation again. When you're dealing with someone who's clinically depressed or who has a bipolar disorder, if you're not trained in those areas to understand the criteria that person will meet or do, or kind of, that's what their criteria are, you have to know what approach to use with them, because every diagnosis and or disorder is different. Then you combine that with their personality and then their environmental, everything, it matters. And this is where this for a license or just a clinician in general, that's where what they were taught to know which pieces of the puzzles to move for that person. Whereas a life coach doesn't have to learn those things. So I think that, again, life coaching can be beneficial for someone who's wanting to kind of just have that motivation. And, you know, I just want to start a business. Well, yeah, like that cheering on the side. I'm not knocking anybody who is a
At
life
all.
coach.
Yes.
Not.
Mhm.
But just be careful when you have someone coming to you for help and then you're not properly, because I don't heal you as a clinician. I don't heal you. I give you the tools so you can use to heal yourself.
Come on.
So you don't know what tools to give for which diagnosis or which disorder. You're doing that person a disservice, to be honest. That's
Amen. And I'm gonna echo off of her. The issue comes when the person who's supposed to be in, unfortunately, the reality is that there's an authoritative position if you're the life coach. And if they don't know the differences to see, oh, this is actually depression, this is outside of my realm, but they want that check. And so now there is such this push, as we know, there's, Black women are astronomically leading the start of new businesses. And it's, which is amazing, right? Let's be clear. I love it. I think it's beautiful. And it is extremely dangerous in the realm of life coaching because, one, everything she just said, and we talked a little bit of this earlier before the meeting, but for the sake of recording, I just want to admit, like, the part about transference and countertransference. So in addition to the person that is receiving the support from the life coach, it is important for the clinician to understand how to hear this information, receive it, and then, make sure that doesn't, because the reality is when you're having everything, you're inundated with information, it's a process to know how to release and to not take that home, so that when you go into your family, you get to still come full, and this is the whole practice. And so it's dangerous for all involved, not just for those who are receiving care. And then the other part of it is, just because one scenario worked for you, and traditionally the life coach conversation becomes a thing of, well, I went through that, so surely I can show somebody else how to do it. But it doesn't account for all of the things that Ms. Ezsa just talked about. The environment, the support that they have, their financial ability, their access to tools and resources. You may not even ask those questions. It's like, just do what I did. It worked for me. Shoot, sweetheart. And we're so busy to get to that. But now for working out, I would love a life coach for but that doesn't dismiss dietitians and their ability to really look at macros and all of these things. So it depends on, are you just trying to do surface work? Are you trying to go deeper? Are we trying to go to the source? Are we looking for sustainable change? I actually want somebody who can get some insurance and I know that there's something on the other side of the information that they tell me and how they guide me. And then I love that she emphasized getting to know the client. And a lot of times that personality piece is so huge. And if you have not been equipped in being able to recognize certain things and triggers and oh, this is so there's all these language that sounds technical or clinical, but they are real systems and models that we know to immediately look at and pay attention. Oh, that's a triangulation happening in the family. This is not a ongoing thing. We know how to talk about boundaries. And then what do? Equip the client with the ability to do the same. The life coaches, they're like, just do it. And it's not necessarily referenced. Not to say that there aren't amazing life coaches, as I know some, love them, support them, and they're amazing. But the biggest gap is the educational foundation is lacking, and there's no reprimand for bad advice and or guidance.
So on top of everything that they just said, I think the two things that come to mind when I think of life coaching versus clinicians is one, dual relationships, and two, disclosure. I think a lot of life coaches use disclosure as a technique.
Yep.
and when you're becoming a clinician, we're taught to not disclose. And if you are going to disclose, you don't give all these details, and you only disclose if it's beneficial to the client.
Yes.
But then you have to be mindful of that just because of counter transfers. And then secondly, as a clinician, you can't wear two hats. So I can't be your therapist and then also be your financial advisor. But a life coach can. So, I think of that when it comes to the differences. But I do know some clinicians that are now going into life coaching, which I think can be extremely beneficial just because they have that clinical piece.
Absolutely.
And they are able to tell the differences when it comes to diagnosing and disorders and, all of that.
I think that's amazing. Can I add, like, my therapist, she also does coaching too. And she's very clear about the differentiation between like what the energy is. And like you said, a lot of people don't understand coaching, even in therapy. Like, I love that she talked about, I'm not doing the healing. I'm giving you the space and the permission and the tools and the resources to do your own healing. Similarly, in coaching, you really are much more reserved back, but they wouldn't even know what coaching that you talked about techniques are, or that they even have access to unless they go through the certification process. So, and I guess I should have differentiated that. Issues with non-certified life coaches. I am A-okay with certified life coaches because they will show you how to be very intentional and clear about what your lane is, when you need to refer out, different things like that. And so when you just mentioned that, I'm like, okay, I can get with that.
I love it. I think that information will help a lot of people at least try to navigate when they need help, or, we don't want people who really need a therapist who are sitting, with a possibly unlicensed or uncertified life coach, right? So being able to navigate and figure out what type of help is appropriate for each individual person. Because I know in school psych, when I went to grad school, the first thing we learned about was goodness of fit, right? Everything doesn't fit and every person doesn't fit, and you kind of learn not to take certain things personally, right? It's not that there's anything wrong with me, and there's not that there's anything wrong with you. We're just not a good fit, and I could just go and find something that is the right fit for me. So it's always good to be able to understand the two different types of services so people can figure it out.
Can I ask one question, or
Yes.
or just throw it out there to y'all? As you just said that, I start thinking about investment, right? And when you were like how a lot of therapists are going back that route to now doing life coaching and things, and I get it. A lot of that also is about payment structures, right? So insurance doesn't pay, unfortunately, therapists the amount that it should. So that's really where our advocacy should be, right? So that they don't feel that they have to go out and be life coaches, because life coaches, ironically, make more money. And so on the other side of that, when I think about, I want somebody who's invested the time, the energy, and sometimes there is judgments around like the dollar amount, but I can care less about the dollar amount. I really want to know that you took the time to care about my experience as a patient or a consumer of the time that I'm going to have with you, because you're going to ask me to invest in myself and exploring and doing the things for me. So I want you to have invested and to have gone through this process. So if you don't know what it's like to bare your soul, you'll be asking me to do stuff that you ain't never did yourself. And like not even at the basic level. And so that's another part of the conversation that it's like, you don't know what this is like, what you're asking of me. But I love you though.
I think that's so profound. Okay, I will say this last thing and then I'm gonna be quiet.
Now keep on
I
talking.
think that's really profound because I literally had, when I first started, I had just graduated and I was in my internship, and so I had a client and she asked me, she said, okay, are you in therapy? Do you have a therapist? And I said, I do. And I didn't take that question negatively. I thought it was very healthy for her to even ask that, because as therapists, we take on so much.
Yeah.
So where are you putting it if you don't go to therapy? Like, where are you taking it, So I think that is important to as a therapist, you go to therapy and you practice self-care. You have to practice what you preach. And whether you let it be known or not, your clients can see it. They can tell. So
That's good for me, because a lot of times I know I find myself going, Tracey, just do what you would tell the people you work with to do. Like, you just need to follow what it is you already know. So I do find myself doing that a lot. Just do what you already know you're supposed to be doing, right? But I think sometimes it requires a little bit more, and to have somebody outside of yourself. So that is good information just in general. I know for myself, included, just something to think about. When you're recommending these things to people, you should have gone through, or at least have some sort of experience with it yourself. So you all are making me think about some things too. So thank you for that. All right. So next, I have a question, and it might be geared more towards Dr. Shuttlesworth, but I know for a lot of us, our stress and or dissatisfaction in the workplace is a big area of concern. And so I know you work a lot with like leadership and building those types of relationships and stresses, because I read through your website. It was amazing. So what are some things that we can do just surface level today? Because I know a lot of this takes a lot of work, but just to guide us in the right direction, some things that we can do to help us with some of that workplace dissatisfaction and or stress.
Well, I'm a kinesthetic learner, and so I'm like, oh, I wish I'd have known, I'd have had this up here. But what we're gonna do, because I can't just say certain things without context, right? So I'm going to put up, you saying for as far as a member of the workplace or as a part of leadership, right?
Either way, because some people are dissatisfied because they're in leadership positions and they have difficulties with their employees, or some people may be in a job and feel like they should be in leadership and aren't, right? So what do we do with that, with all of those feelings? Because I feel like for some people, this is also adding to that stress that we don't, or that mental health issue that we don't necessarily talk about a lot in the Black community. Because a lot of times we're talking about community violence and over policing and generational trauma, but we don't talk about just the small everyday things that we're going through in a workplace.
Absolutely. So if you can click that little security button for me to be able to share my screen, that would be great. But part of it, as you just said, a lot of times it starts with one, knowing that regardless of where you sit on the org chart, you have a responsibility to realize how much you're influencing the workplace. So one of the questions, I don't care what interview I was on, I always ask, like, how do you all celebrate? How do you grieve? What are the things that are important to your culture, the workplace culture? And how do you ask these questions about who has access to the mic? Those are the things that I was asking fresh out of college, because I knew those things were important to me. And so in the bio, you mentioned about the healthy model, and I'm going to share it. So this is what I work with organizations and being able to do, is to understand what a healthy workplace is. And when one does choose to be healthy, we go through what these 7 keys are, and I'll go through them very quickly. The first one is honoring everyone's journey, right? So being mindful of where we've been and where we plan to go. A lot of times in the workplace, we forget, I came into this door, they chose me for a reason. I have skills and ability that I've used in other places. And a lot of times we just leave that at the door versus bringing that with us. So we come in like, well, I'm a newbie, I need to learn them, but what about them learning you, right? And how do you make sure that you give that up? That information to them in a way that puts you in a position of, yes, I'm an asset. I walk in the door asset, and I have goals. What are my goals? And I want to make sure I position myself to be able to do the things that I desire to do. And a lot of times we're resenting our experience because we're in positions that we really don't want to be in. And so we just miserable. We're not getting the projects and assignments that help us because we haven't told our boss how to do that. So establishing excellence as our norm. Do we have access to the resources that we need to be successful? Do we know how to speak up and ask for what we need? And then what happens when I really need another person, but we don't have the budget for it? Well, okay, well, excellence still can include my boundaries to make sure that when I am showing up, I get to show up and show out and give you what excellence means today, which is very different from perfectionism. That's another conversation. Advance the culture with innovation. We want to make sure that we're contributing to growth. How are we leveraging technology? How are we growing? Anything that's not growing is dead. So we want to make sure that we're doing that. And in leadership, we want to lead with vulnerability and joy. Like, be human. When you're in a leadership role, a lot of times we feel like we just have to, be in this archaic, just giving. We're human. Everybody's going through a human experience. But everything, like going into what Nikiis was talking about earlier, but they don't need to know all your business now. We go into, that's a whole nother conversation around vulnerability as well. And joy. Who wants to follow somebody who look like they just miserable too? Then they set the tone for the workplace where everybody dreading themselves, and they don't even realize in leadership that you coming in exhausted. Like, get yourself together before you walk through the doors, because that energy is cancerous. And so, not to say that you can't have a moment or you can't have somebody else that you can rely on, but when it becomes a trend, somebody needs to be able to, pull you by your coattail. Thrive with efficiency and passion. So there needs to be an urgency to some of the work that we do. Like, we should be willing to seek solutions quickly and be passionate about it. How do I get to bring who I am outside of the workplace into the workplace? I made the decision very early on in my career. If I can't bring all of me, I don't need to be here. So, but a lot of people don't feel that, because they feel like, I need this check. I'm going to do what these people tell me to do. And because of the way the economy is, it's impacting people to stay in places that they really don't need to be in, because they're unhealthy. And the reality is the gossiping and if the organization isn't doing something to really combat that, and they're just like, give, then it's going to be not only just overwhelming, but it is toxic and it impacts health. And then the last two I'll do very quickly is hear with the intention to act. So a lot of times, even of our customers or of ourselves, we're asking all these surveys, and we'll get the team together, and what can we do to be better? Okay, so you're listening, but are you hearing what the people are actually saying? Are you doing something with the information, and there's action behind it? Because if you know that you have to do and deliver, you're going to ask those questions differently. And then lastly, yes, teamwork makes the dream work. But how do we yield to the awesomeness of you? How do we yield to the awesomeness of the individual to say, you know what? You all bring something to the table that if Ezsa wasn't, I wouldn't be able to do this. I'm so grateful for her. Like, how do we talk about people in their absence, as we do in their presence? How do we talk about the unique things and the talent and the voice that they bring to the table? And what about those who aren't speaking? How do we make space for them? So there's, again, I got all the thoughts of how and what we can do in the workplace. But it starts with, of course, choosing to be healthy.
Good job.
Thanks.
That was nice.
Well, sorry, I was on mute. I was like, thank you so much for that.
Thank you,
I
Mama Seabrook.
found, just different workplaces, why your business Be Grow and the information that you're bringing is so necessary, especially in even some of these larger businesses and larger organizations, right? Because a lot of times we're here and we're in the small seat listening to this, and we're like, yes. And I was like, I need for the people in the big seats to hear this.
To actually listen.
This needs to be top down, right? But that was
Yes.
awesome. I loved it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And so now I'm just going to open up the floor. We're getting closer towards the end, just for you all, giving you the floor to tell us a little bit about your organization. So we have Be Grow, we have Mind Over You, we have, and I want to get it right because there are a lot of words. So we're going to pulling. Want to get it?
The acronym is POUR. So POUR. And
Okay, that would make it
pulling others up as I rise.
Oh, that makes more sense to remember the acronym than I can remember the words. Thank you for that. So you all can tell us a little bit more about your organizations, just so the people know. So we can start with Ezsa because your mic is already off.
Oh, okay. I didn't. Okay. Again, my name is Ezsa Allen, and I actually have a agency called Social Age Counseling. That is an agency for therapeutic and counseling for all ages. I'm in the school systems and Palm Beach County school systems in the daytime, and I do groups and individual and family therapy. Then I created a nonprofit organization called Mind Over You. And Mind Over You was created to reach my parents, actually. And then it began bigger to just reaching communities. And I started it to promote the mental health awareness in minority communities by doing different events and through my social media.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm going to have to make sure I'm keeping up with that. So we at Femme Noire can come and join some of your events because it sounds like it's amazing.
Definitely. We would
All right.
love that.
And Nikiis, tell us about POUR.
Okay, so POUR is the name of my counseling service. I provide mental health and emotional counseling to young adults up until the age of 30. I have counseled over the age of 30, but I realized that I've recognized in the last year that my population right now is adolescents, so about 10, 11 years old up until the age of 30. I provide telehealth counseling, and I also work out of an office in Boca. And I also post mental health videos from time to time on TikTok and on Instagram. And so my Instagram is POUR_MH. I'll put it in the chat. And my TikTok is I am Nikiis Taylor, or I am Nikiis T. I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you. We will definitely have to follow you on TikTok. I make sure that our organization's TikTok page, we are keeping up with all of our African American and women of color who are in the mental health world, just to make sure that we are sharing and getting their voices out there because it's absolutely needed. So thank you for that. And then Dr. Shuttlesworth, tell us more about Be Lead Grow.
Yeah, so we work with organizations in preventing and healing toxic work environments, and that is by building true community in the workplace. And a lot of times it's, as you mentioned earlier, like really creating the space and the time and the energy for team members to get to know each other and to get to know themselves in a deeper way. Because when you know who you are, you start to demand things very differently, and you get to show up differently. And so that's what we're here for. And moving forward, our effort is also going to be in working with organizations to strategically support those who have been the first and the only. So whether it's the first woman, the first African American, the first Asian, the first LGBTQIA+ member, whatever it is in that seat, how they identify as having been the first or the only in that seat, the first person in their family to go to college. There's unique needs and things that happen on their journey to leadership that somebody didn't just hold my hand and walk me into it. So we have to think about how we support them if we want to continue this pipeline for Black leaders and Black voices. And I'm definitely here for it all, and definitely willing to support you all as however I can.
Thank you all so much. This was wonderful. And I'm seeing all this information in the chat. We are going to make sure we definitely put it out on our social media and on our website so that as people you see our information, we can have them click directly to them, to you, because that is also part of our mission to make sure that people are aware of what services there are, especially for women of color out in the community, because I like to always say you don't know what you don't know. And so we want to make sure that the people know. So on behalf of the ladies of the Femme Noire Collective Incorporated, I would like to thank our distinguished panelists and you, our guests, for spending this time with us this evening. Please join us next month, March 28th, for This Woman's Work, as we celebrate Women's History Month with mom blogger and influencer Sharonda Stewart of Sporty Mamas, as she shares her 5 tips to improve work-life balance. If you would like to know more about our organization or you're interested in membership, please visit our website at www.lafemmenoirecollective.com. Thank you.